This is a special edition of WPTV To The Point with Michael Williams.
And welcome to this special edition of To The Point. In just 12 days, you, the voter, and your fellow citizens will decide who will be the President of the United States for the next 4 years. Tonight, the candidates, as you well know, go head-to-head for the final time, doing all they can to try to sway undecided voters. You're looking live at the Curb Event Center at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. In just under 2 hours, President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden will take the stage for their second and final debate of this election season. NBC's Kristen Welker will be the moderator. Here are the topics that will be discussed tonight, picked by the moderator: fighting COVID-19, American families, race in America, climate change, national security, and leadership. The president's campaign manager sent the debate commission a letter earlier this week asking them to add a section on foreign policy. Biden's campaign responded saying both campaigns and the commission had agreed months ago that the moderator would choose the topics. The first presidential debate, held at the end of September, as you well know, overshadowed by frequent interruptions. So this debate will be somewhat different. Both candidates will have their microphones cut while the other delivers a 2-minute opening response to each new debate topic. Microphones for both candidates will then be open during the following discussions. Both campaigns must agree to rule changes, but the Commission on Debates says this is not a rule change. Instead, a way it says to enforce a rule already agreed to. Once the debate is over, both candidates will once again hit the campaign trail. President Trump will be in Central Florida and the Panhandle tomorrow before flying to West Palm Beach Friday evening. The White House confirming today the president will take part in early voting on Saturday morning in Palm Beach County. As in previous presidential elections, Florida is proving to be a most critical battleground state. Both candidates and their running mates have already made many stops over the past 2 months. And anchor Jay CASHMERE joins us now with a look at the battle for the Sunshine State. Jay?
Michael, since the beginning of September, each presidential candidate and their running mates have been in Florida a combined 11 times. President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence have made the most stops.
We're going to win this state. We're going to win 4 more years in the White House. We're going to make our country greater than it has ever been before.
The president has made stops in Jupiter, Ocala, Sanford, Jacksonville, and Doral, while former Vice President Joe Biden has campaigned in Kissimmee and Broward County.
We look around at our neighbors and we know people are hurting. A lot of folks are worried about making their next rent payment, their next mortgage payment. They're not only whether or not they can purchase their prescription drugs.
Each candidate also participated in a town hall in Miami hosted by NBC.
As President of the United States, I would make a federal mandate on federal property, federal buildings. You must wear a mask, period, and you must be socially distanced.
The cure cannot be worse than the problem itself. We did the right thing. We were expected to lose 2,200,000 people and maybe more than that. We're at 210,000 people. One person is too much. It should have never happened.
29 electoral votes are at stake. We know the president will hold rallies in Central Florida and the Panhandle tomorrow, and Vice President Pence is also expected to be in Tallahassee this weekend. No campaign events have been scheduled thus far in Florida for Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, but former President Barack Obama will be in Miami campaigning for the pair on Saturday. Michael, back to you.
Jay, thank you. Florida's seen a record number of Hispanic voters this year. They make up 17%, or roughly 1 in 5 of the potential voters in the state, and could be a big part of the decision on where the electoral votes in Florida go for the White House. In order to secure the Hispanic vote, Mr. Biden and President Trump appealing to their campaign issues. Capitol reporter Forrest Saunders in South Florida talking to voters, and tonight telling us how for some immigration policy is at the top of the list.
I am Araceli Villanueva, Mexican from Mexico City.
Miami realtor Araceli Villanueva has firsthand experience with the nation's immigration system.
I really didn't have any great opportunities in Mexico to do what I wanted to do.
Arriving in the U.S. 27 years ago, she became a successful realtor and eventual citizen in 2016.
I've always been very ambitious in the good way, and I came ready to be successful, and I did.
With America her home, she now wants to make sure it's ready for the next generation, her son. And the border is a big concern.
I'm against the gangsters, I'm against the drug dealers, I'm against the child traffickers, and we have a lot of them in Mexico and here coming illegally.
Immigration policy is one of the hottest issues amongst Florida's Latino population, and the candidates are desperate to capitalize.
We might not look or sound the same, pero nuestro corazón.
Con Trump derrotaremos a los castrochavistas.
In South Florida, a war is raging to try and nab support from as many Latinos as possible. A record-breaking 2.5 million registered statewide this year. Immigration taking center stage in messaging.
America will never be a socialist country.
Trump wants the border wall, zero tolerance for illegal crossing, and an end to dreamer protections. Biden, meanwhile, looking for citizenship paths for undocumented, reduced penalties for illegal crossing, and ease for asylum seekers.
Biden for president!
The stakes have been high for the vice president especially. While his Latino support nationally is outpacing Trump, he's underperforming compared to 2016. That's according to data from UCLA Nationscape.
We're the minority in our family.
Latinos we spoke with attributing it to Trump's rhetoric, labeling his opponent as a return to socialism.
We don't want communism. That's what he's saying. They believe it wholeheartedly. They've swallowed the hook and the fish and the whole rod.
Fighting back, Biden supporters are branding the president a racist, reminding voters of Trump's policy separating families at the border and some of his more inflammatory remarks about Southern immigrants.
They're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Recent data from Pew Research shows Biden reclaiming some of his Latino losses in these final weeks, but Villanueva isn't included.
He's not against immigrants.
A diehard Trump supporter.
He's not against legal immigrants. And if you have a talent, he wants you here.
She says a tougher border is the key to keeping her son and her country safe. In Miami, Forrest Saunders, WPTV News Channel 5.
And in the final push for votes, this week we spoke to representatives from both campaigns and asked, what is their candidate's closing argument to the Floridians watching this night? Senior advisor to the Trump campaign, Steve Cordes, says you can expect to hear a lot about the president's record on the economy, especially pre-COVID. As for the president's closing argument, Cordes says everyone needs to ask themselves one question.
If you believe you're better off now than you were 4 years ago, if you believe in the track record of Donald Trump in creating the conditions for prosperity, then we hope to persuade you, we hope to earn your vote, that he's going to make you and the country more prosperous over these next 4 years.
Meanwhile, Democrat and former Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams says former Vice President Joe Biden will have answers and compassion on everything from racial justice to health care.
And lastly, he understands that racial reckoning, that our systemic racism and the unfortunate challenges that have been avoided by and unfortunately exacerbated by our current president, that he is ready to tackle that inequality, to tackle systemic inequities, and to tackle systemic racism.
Abrams' home state, Georgia, has not gone for a Democratic nominee for the White House since Bill Clinton in 1992. Right now, polls show a tight race there between Mr. Biden and President Donald Trump. As millions remain unemployed across the nation and in Florida, we take a close look at each candidate's plan to try to get Floridians back into the workforce. Plus, voter intimidation, the FBI investigating emails sent to people in Florida, what you need to know to make sure your vote is protected. Millions of Floridians lost their jobs when the pandemic first hit in March, and people are struggling in many ways to get back to work. It's happening, but for many a slow process. The latest jobs report in Florida shows unemployment stands at 7.6%. All of our local counties, all 5, below that number. And as the presidential campaign ramps up towards the ending here in Florida, jobs, of course, topic number 1 for so many. WPTV News Channel 5's Matt Cesney reached out to both campaigns for their plans on getting people back to work.
On the campaign trail across Florida,
Mike Pence.
It's about getting workers back to work.
And across Florida and the country, folks are worried about being able to pay their rent or their next mortgage payment.
we're the ones standing up for the American worker, the American family, and for the American dream.
Just the two of us.
Valerie White hears the speeches.
I'd like to hear their policies on both sides.
An out-of-work musician in Palm Beach County since March, Valerie is among the thousands looking to the presidential race for some solutions.
I'd like to hear that they care about the gig workers.
Before the coronavirus pandemic hit in the early months of 2020, unemployment numbers in Florida, and in particular Palm Beach and the Treasure Coast counties, hovered at around 3%. By midsummer, the job loss was drastic, with many counties in double digits with unemployment. And then by the start of fall, signs of some recovery, but it's been slow, and there is worry that some of the jobs lost may not come back.
I think this is the most compelling case the president has to make to the American people. Both his economic record of what he has done in the past, as well as what is happening right now.
Steve Cortez is a senior advisor to the president and says the recovery from the pandemic shutdown is already underway.
We've added over 11 million jobs back to the economy over the last 5 months. And once again, these are good jobs that pay well, 4.7% wage growth on an annualized basis right now. States like Florida, like your state, are leading the way.
8% unemployment rate.
State Senator Bobby Powell is with the Biden campaign.
Well, you look at the Biden plan, he's got a plan that will put several million people back to work.
The former vice president is looking at ending corporate tax cuts to help fund a reinvestment plan for the nation.
With Joe Biden in office, the Build Back Better plan, it gives us an opportunity to reinvest in Palm Beach County, in the local community, because we send a lot of money away, and it's time that we invest in people who will change the environment, change the state, change the economy.
For both candidates, the final push is on, and jobs and the economy are a key message to voters. Matt Cesney, WPTV News Channel 5.
Early voting underway, of course, in Florida. Tens of thousands of you have waited in line since Monday to cast ballots, and you still have a lot of time. Early voting ends not this weekend, but through to the end of next weekend. So far, a high voter turnout, 33% in Palm Beach County. Martin County, the highest voter turnout in our area, nearly 41%. St. Lucie County, 31%. 38% of registered voters in Indian River County have already voted. And in Okeechobee County, 26% and counting. Tonight, the FBI warning about threatening emails being sent to Florida voters. The subject line reads, "Vote for Trump or else," and seemed to be from the Proud Boys. They were sent to voters in 4 Florida counties. Proud Boys, a right-wing group. The director of national intelligence, though, saying the emails came from Iran and Russia. The head of the FBI says these international efforts will not undermine our democracy.
We've been working for years as a community to build resilience in our election infrastructure, and today that infrastructure remains resilient.
And the FBI director cautions you, be skeptical about any threatening email near a big election. And if anyone receives an email like this one, please report it. We're joined now by WPTV political analyst Brian Crowley and Mariana Mancuso, and we thank you both for being with us. Off of that theme today, U.S. officials are saying Russian hackers have targeted the networks of dozens of state and local governments in recent days, trying to steal data or doing so from at least 2 servers. I talked to the Palm Beach County election supervisor a short while ago, says she has no indication of anything here. But again, it's the specter of this that makes this as critical a piece of the election puzzle as anything else. Brian?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to consider in this election cycle is, yes, there's a potential for outside hacking from foreign countries. And there's potential for inside the country mischief. I think what aggravates all of this, however, is that we have a president who's gone to great lengths, just as he did in 2016 when he was running for the first time, to create this idea that the election is going to be stolen from him and everything is being rigged against him. And this year in particular, he's cast a lot of doubt on the validity of elections, the validity of mail-in voting, the validity of all sorts of things about the elections. And then you add this into the mix, and we're really testing people's belief in how our system works.
Mariana, your take.
You know, whoever sent these from Iran, it's obviously an amateur's move to try and provoke opposition. The reality and the real threat here continues to be Russia. And we have seen, as Brian has pointed out, the presidents continue just to invite them into our elections. And, you know, I think that this is really troubling, and it's going to cause some voters to think twice. And that's unfortunate, because their vote should not be suppressed and they should be able to vote for who they want. After all, this is a free country.
To tonight's debate, for Floridians and for Americans, the last chance for so many people all at once to hear closing arguments from the president seeking re-election and from Joe Biden. In our big, diverse state, who do they pitch that argument to, and how do you pitch it to Floridians to make your case for this pivotal vote? Mariana?
Well, I think that climate change is something that we're going to have to hear from both candidates on. You know, Florida is dead center in terms of climate change. We are right here on the cusp. We've seen Representative Brian Mast do a lot for the algae blooms here in South Florida. And a lot of Floridians are concerned about climate change as well as healthcare. But again, healthcare will not be talked about tonight, but we will talk about the COVID crisis. And we know that has also struck home for a lot of Floridians.
Brian, what is your sense of that as we talk tonight about various topics, COVID among them, national leadership, race relation, and more climate change? Talking to a national audience, but with always an eye and ear to the Florida electorate that's so crucial. What do you expect to hear that may resonate or that they'll want to have resonate?
Well, I think with Florida voters, you're especially with such a huge part of our population are seniors, you know, they're concerned about health care. And I think that there's going to be a lot of discussion about health care, a lot of it triggered on the COVID crisis, which we have seen, in, excuse me, in recent days, an uptick in the count in Florida. So I think that's going to be a big issue. I think the economy is going to be a big issue. I agree that climate change is going to be a big issue. Unfortunately, I don't know how much time they're going to be able to spend talking on those things tonight.
Brian, let me ask you, if you gauged only by the number of visits, President Trump or a top surrogate crisscrossing Florida, it seems every day, every other day, is Joe Biden paying enough personal attention to Florida right now? He's been here, but he's being lapped in terms of visits to Florida. Talk about strategy. Everything I read suggests the president must have Florida and try and get a Florida-Pennsylvania wins in his column if he has any chance at re-election. Joe Biden, the calculus may be different. How do you see it as we get to these final stages?
Well, there's two ways to read this. One is that Biden is fairly confident in winning Florida and that Trump is spending a lot more time here because he's worried about losing Florida. The other way to read it is that, you know, Biden is taking too much for granted about the state and maybe making a mistake by not spending more time here. And, you know, the fact that Trump is going to be in West Palm Beach and, you know, do early voting in West Palm Beach this weekend and, you know, then travel around other parts of the state. You know, he's made it very, very clear that Florida is critical to him. And I know there are some Democrats who wish that Biden would spend a little more time in the Sunshine State.
Marianne, a brief closing comment for this segment on the same question.
You know, a lot of Floridians are going to tune in tonight, those that are already decided and those that are undecided. But really what's going to be interesting to see, as Brian had mentioned, the president will be here on Saturday early voting. And if that really sways the county to maybe flip red in this next election. I know that our RPOF, as well as the local Republican Party, have been spending a lot of time getting out there and doing flag waving and making sure that they're touching all of the voters. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on election night.
Always a close vote in Florida. Mariana, Brian, we'll see you on the other side of the break. Thank you very much. The November 3rd election, more than just the presidential election, of course, and we're going to talk to Brian and Mariana about that. Local congressional races, amendment questions. You'll decide whether or not to add those amendments to the Florida Constitution. Requires a 60% vote to do so. The amendments range from a minimum wage hike over the next several years up to $15 an hour to property taxes and who can vote in primaries. Should they be open primaries? WPTV looking at each amendment to help you make an informed decision. And you can read up on the amendments on WPTV.com and our streaming apps, of course. You'll also find voter guides and learn where to vote. All at WPTV.com/election2020. Still ahead, our WPTV analysts return to discuss those local congressional races and more. Now joined again by WPTV political analyst Brian Crowley and Mariana Mancuso. Thanks for being back. The presidential race overshadows everything, but we can't forget some pivotal races here, including the congressional races. What are you looking at, Mariana?
I'm watching Pam Keith versus incumbent Representative Brian Mast. I think it's going to be really interesting. You know, Pam Keith has run before and she lost a primary to Lauren Bear a couple years ago, and now she's actually giving Representative Brian Mast a run for his money. Congressional
District 18 covering Martin, St. Lucie, parts of Palm Beach County. Brian, you for four congressional races, what's a particular note to you that you'll be keeping an eye on?
I think the Pam Keith-Brian Mast race is important because if Pam Keith, now that seat has often changed hands, but I think if Pam Keith wins in that district and throughout the night, if it looks like she's winning substantially, it could be indicative of what's happening not only in the Treasure Coast, but around the rest of the state.
I wonder, it's a great point, Brian, and I wondered that and what other barometers will you look for in terms of races we've seen? Of course, the congressional races. We have no statewide races in Florida this year.
Right.
But what else might you be looking for that'll be barometers for you on election night above and beyond that?
Well, I think we look carefully at a couple of the amendments. I think the minimum wage amendment, if that starts to win big, that will be an indication of the mood of the voters. I think that, if we start to see, there's been some effort from outside groups to try to influence state legislative races on behalf of Democrats. If we start to see some incumbent Republicans who are not expected to either lose or have unusually close races, that could be indicative of what's happening around the rest of the state in a way that would indicate whether or not Biden has got a real chance of winning Florida.
Mariana, what'll be top of mind that you'll look for in terms of political tea leaves that night as an early read?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm going to be looking for outside of the CD18 race is also looking at Lois Frankel and Laura Loomer. It has just been a very unique race in general. Laura Loomer is not allowed on any social media platforms, and she's raised a lot of money. And I think that's going to be very interesting. And for me, it's going to be indicative to see if she wins or if she loses, how close is the loss for her? And is that the direction in which the local Republican and overall national Republican Party heading? We've seen what they're doing in Georgia in terms of Marjorie Greene Taylor running on these conspiracy theorists and QAnon and things of that nature. Is that a possibility to gain any traction here in South Florida? It's something that I'm very curious to see on election night.
Mariana Mancuso, Brian Crowley, thanks as always. We'll see you Sunday and To the Point, and buckle up for election night. They'll be with us as always. We appreciate their expertise, and we'll be back after this. Thank you for joining us tonight for the special edition of To the Point, a final live look at the debate stage. Nashville, Tennessee, the final presidential debate. Full coverage tonight at 11. Good night.